Hi everyone, I am Heather, and I want to welcome you to Magnificent Authors Podcast, brought to you by Magnificent Mamas. This is the show where we'll celebrate the magic of storytelling and the power of words. I'm your host, Heather, and each week I'll be sitting down with incredible authors from all walks of life to explore their creative journeys, uncover their writing secrets, and delve into worlds they create. Whether you are an aspiring writer, a passionate reader, or simply curious about the minds behind your favorite books, this is the podcast for you. So grab a cozy blanket, pour yourself a cup of tea, and get ready to be inspired by the magnificent authors who join us. Let's dive in. Hi everyone, I am Heather with Magnificent Mamas and Magnificent Authors Podcast. We're joined here today with Joshua,
Elyashiv.
Elyashiv?
Yep.
Okay, Joshua Elyashiv. So, Joshua, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Joshua Elyashiv. I am a Marine Corps veteran and former business owner. I wrote Privilege Lost. It was my memoir. I started writing it to deal with trauma. And I'm in a band. We were writing an original song. I presented a song to the band. The band was just not grasping the emotion I was trying to convey. So I let them read one page out of what was at the time a journal. And the lead singer sat down, cried for 5 minutes while the rest of the band was reading it, and then got up and knocked it out of the park. And it became our first ever song that was released. It's done very, very well. But what happened after that was my band just started reaching out to me 3 times a week. They wanted to know more. They wanted to read more. And I realized that maybe what I had been through and just been writing about for myself was something that other people would benefit from hearing. So I started focusing on making it into a coherent book rather than just a bunch of journal entries. And along the way, our band gained a bunch of traction. So I ended up leaving my full-time job and career selling my business. So now I'm a published author with a pending movie based off of the book. It'll be in theaters hopefully in about 2 years. And our band just got signed by Dragon Farm Records, a subsidiary of Sony, Wyclef's label, this past weekend. So on to huge things: singer, songwriter, bass player, author. And that's all I do is create now.
That is awesome. And it's so awesome that you're following your dreams and you're doing your calling. Sorry, hold on just a second. Okay. My drink, sorry. Nico, make sure you fix that part. Okay. Sorry again. I think it's awesome that you are going to have a movie based off your book. How did you end up with that opportunity?
Great question. I can take almost no credit for it. One of the insurance agents with the commercial insurance brokerage that handled the plumbing contracting company that my wife and I own purchased a copy of my book, read it on a flight to California to visit some family, loved it so much, called me as soon as he landed. He read the whole book on the flight to California.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he devoured it. He told everybody in California about it, read it again on the way back. He ended up purchasing like a case or 2 of my books and took it upon himself to go to every entertainment lawyer, movie producer in and around South Florida, and then in California, LA, Hollywood area again, just walking in with my book and saying, here, I'm giving you a copy of this. You have to read it. This has to be a movie. This is the greatest book that has been written in the last 20 years. And ultimately that caught the attention of the head of a studio in California. The head of the studio actually grew up in Parkland, where Stoneman Douglas High School is, about 10 minutes from where I currently live. And just felt powerfully moved by the book, by the story, and jumped on it. Boom. So I can't say that I had never even thought about sending it off to be considered. It just, one of my readers felt so powerful about it that they took the initiative uh, to make it happen themselves.
That's awesome. And you're self-published,
I
correct?
am. I'm hybrid published. I
Okay.
went through Manhattan Publishing Group. So I had some of the resources available through one of the major publishing houses, but very little of the oversight, like
Yeah.
being self-published. I paid out of pocket instead of receiving payment for my book, but I'm really glad that I did it that way instead of accepting an offer of representation from one of the big five,
Yeah.
because as well as my book has done off of just my own efforts and its own merits, I'm going to be much more financially comfortable with a lot more control and freedom than I would have been otherwise. And they missed out.
That's so true. So true. Okay. So tell us about this amazing book.
Well, before I tell you about the amazing book, I'll tell you I sent out over 1,000 queries to literary agents before I decided to self-publish. I was getting the same rejection over and over and over again, that the only books they were interested in publishing in the nonfiction memoir biography category were those written by trans women of color overcoming their struggles and finding love. And unfortunately, I'm clearly not a person of color, and I'm pretty heteronormative. So I got the same rejection enough times from enough different agencies that I was like, I'm just the wrong. They're looking for the wrong thing because of what they're focusing on right now.
Yeah.
I don't fit that mold. So that's where I ended up self-publishing. You want me to tell you about my awesome story?
Yes.
All right.
Definitely.
So in a nutshell, because I want everybody listening and watching to go read the book for themselves.
Yes. Don't give away spoilers, please.
I'm not going to give away spoilers. So a long story short, my awesome story is a memoir. I am a neurodivergent individual. I am fairly unique. I grew up with a photographic memory, went to military school. Grew up in a Jewish household, the oldest of four. I have 3 sisters that were born within 5 years of me, so we're all very close in age, very chaotic household.
Yeah.
But upper middle class, decent childhood. I could be the boy next door. And I also could be the person in the wrong side of the tracks. I could be anybody that you meet anywhere: cousin, brother, nephew, father, son, next door neighbor, which is what makes my story so unique. I skipped a grade, graduated a couple of years early, valedictorian, near perfect SAT scores, threw away the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis to enlist. I had a congressional nomination from Katherine Harris, and I wasted it because I had skipped a grade and then graduated early, and so I was younger than everybody else who was graduating by almost 2 years. I was about 16, and I needed to be 18 or very close to it to go start my plebe summer there. So joined the Marine Corps. Got brainwashed, got hurt, was fortunate enough to not see combat. Came home, didn't know what to do. And I took the only real skills that I thought that I had, which was a background in Krav Maga and Jiu-Jitsu, and I started teaching. Fell in love, had my heart broken, thought she was out of my league, and allowed my heart to keep getting broken rather than terminate the toxic relationship. Being younger at the time, I was in my early 20s. I was immature. I reciprocated toxicity with toxicity rather than maturely leaving. All of the details are in the book. This is a quick summary. And I made the mistake of pursuing exclusively married women, which was the first step to my entire story. One of the married women decided she felt guilty about what had happened, confessed it to her husband. He was a federal investigator. He used his power and his position to follow me around for 2 years, trying to catch me doing something wrong. I didn't speed, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't even try weed until I was in my 30s. So I was ultra boring. He couldn't catch me doing anything wrong because I was probably the most boring person that he had ever met in his life.
Crazy.
Yep. I at some point I finally did mature just a little bit and left the toxicity. And I failed to notify the VA, the government, of my change in marital status. It resulted in me being slightly overpaid by $104, which gave him the opportunity to turn it into something criminal. He charged me with conspiracy to commit fraud because I hadn't actually done anything wrong, but if I failed to notify them or they failed to rectify the problem, it could have been. And
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting arrested for that, and he used that as a platform to, tell the media all about me and weave these fantastic stories that sold a lot of newspapers. But if you scratch a little bit deeper than just the sensationalization that they put in the newspaper articles are blatantly untrue. Um, so I ended up in custody. I had absolute faith in the judicial system at the time. I was still fairly fresh out of the Marine Corps. And that brainwashing, I believed in our justice system. I believed in our country. I believed if I just walked in there and I told the truth, everything would sort itself out. And the man who represents himself has a fool for a client, and that was me. The court appointed me an attorney, but it was essentially self-representation, and I was sentenced to a slap on the wrist with a massive $90,000 restitution. They wanted me to pay back all of the money that I would have collected over the next 60 years of my life, adjusted for inflation, had I not gotten caught. Not the actual $104 that I got paid. So while I was in custody, he had set me up with one of the officers that worked in the facility to be assaulted. I was assaulted, and I defended myself. After I'd been hit and a couple of times, I hit back because I didn't know who it was. He was in civilian clothes, and I broke his nose. I accept full responsibility for that, and I talk about all of the details in my book. It's definitely like the stuff that made all of the news with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, all of the things that catalyzed that. I experienced it 3 to 5 years before any of that made headlines. And so for a year, I was kept in a 7-foot by 10-foot solitary confinement, beaten unconscious 3 times a day. I was given 1 slice of white bread every 2 weeks. I was forced to drink out of the toilet, but they had turned the water off to it, so I couldn't flush it. Your imagination can do the rest. I was denied medical attention, and it's for about 13 months. For about 13 months, I was tortured 3 times a day, demeaned, belittled. By the same people that were at the facility where I had defended myself and injured the officer. They threw the book at me, gave me 5 additional years for having defended myself. And my family, I didn't actually get access to the video footage until 2 weeks before my 5 years ended, which showed that it was 100% self-defense, that I had been hit 4 times before I reacted. So I spent 5 years in prison for a crime I didn't actually commit, which was then expounded by the commission of a crime in the course of self-defense. And like I said, I own full responsibility for having injured the guy. Reasonable person should have known that if a person who was not wearing an inmate's uniform shows up, he's probably an employee of the jail. But it was a dangerous, rough place, and the guy didn't say a word to me. He just started hitting me. So that led me to, when I came home, I had a lot of trauma, a lot of demons from that. My 5 years were spent completely alone. And when I say completely alone, to anybody who's not white-skinned, I was a white boy.
Yeah.
To everybody who was, I was Jewish, so I was the wrong kind of white. And so I was completely on my own. I look a little bit older and rougher now because I've grown my hair out, but
it looks good though.
Thank you. And a little bit of time has passed, but me at 25 to 30, I looked like I was 18 or 19. When I got out at 31, 32 years old, I was still getting carded if I wanted to buy a lottery ticket. And so I'm a not terrible looking guy that also looked young, and it presented a lot of opportunities for people who thought they could prey on me. I'm also a military veteran who taught Krav Maga jiu-jitsu to military and law enforcement for a living up to this point. And so it created a very interesting story that is very Orange is the New Black. If instead of a pretty blonde woman, you had John Wick or Jack Reacher as the main character in that environment. And so my book is action-packed. It is 100% true. In fact, it's most of what's in it is downplayed because the truth of what happened to me is so sensational that you would expect to see it in like a Marvel or a DC movie. You would never believe that it was a true story. And so my editor and we really had to water it down. So anybody who reads my book and you're thinking to yourself, this can't possibly be true, please know that we toned it down and made it much more PG than it really was. And for those who think that it is incredibly trauma heavy, also please know that it is actually much heavier in reality than what was able to make it into the book.
Oh yeah, definitely. They definitely are very careful with the triggers now.
Yes, so my trigger warning, my book will have trauma triggers for violence. My book will have trauma triggers for racial injustice, both directions, all directions, not both directions, all directions, for religious triggers and trauma and persecution in multiple directions. My book is not anti-law enforcement or anti-military, although there will be triggers for people who are black and white one way or the other, because I talk about the truth of what I personally experienced, which was a couple of really bad actors abusing their power and a handful of really good ones who used their power to try to minimize suffering when they could have been maximizing it. So my book is polarizing, but I just want to be clear. I have a lot of people who have read the preview of my book and thought that it was 100% anti-law enforcement or anti-military, and it's not. I'm proud to have said I served in the Marine Corps. And a couple of my closest friends, they came to my wedding 3 months ago, are active law enforcement officers. So my book is not pro or anti anything. It is just a memoir that speaks to exactly what I went through.
Damn.
Oh, fair trigger warning. My book does speak on the sexual exploitation of a minor because it does a flashback to my childhood when I was molested. So just note that there is anybody who's reading it, if that's a trauma trigger for you, there is a chapter that flashes back to my childhood. That particular chapter is a chapter that you should read in small portions to not be overwhelmed if that's a trauma trigger for you.
Yeah. Does your book at the beginning or somewhere, I'm not sure how they do all the triggers, but does it say that their triggers are there?
No, it does not. It does not. While I am a hardcore, I'm Jewish. My wife and I are vegan. So while I'm a hardcore supporter of equality and equity and love everything that is typically associated with the left and the woke movement, I'm a weird juxtaposition between conservative and liberal values, and so I did not want my book to lean conservative or liberal. I just wanted to tell my story. So I didn't put any of those trigger warnings there because 50% of our country would see those trigger warnings and not pick up my book because they would assume I'm a bleeding heart liberal. I am a little bit, but I'm also not. So I wanted my book to be readable by the largest majority of people without having anybody judge a book by its cover or by its warnings at the front, because I hope that by reading my book, whether you're triggered or not, you'll be inspired to speak up, to vote, to look at the people in your community just a little bit more compassionately, as your neighbors, and not as Republican, Democrat, Black, White, Jewish, Muslim, Christian.
Yeah.
I want my book to make sure that other people don't have to go through what I went through. Not to justify or validate anybody else's personal beliefs. I just want the world to be a better place. Nobody should have to go through the things that I wrote about in my book. And I hope that because I am well spoken and well written, that my story will be heard by people who would have typically ignored the people that experience what I experienced. Because my story is not unique. It's just unique in that somebody like me is telling.
Yeah, definitely. I get it completely. I think from everything you've said, it sounds so moving. And I know you hear that all the time, but
I can't read my own book. I can't read my own book.
Wow. It's showing so much just from what you're describing, excuse me. And it's definitely feels like the kind of book that reaches into your heart and twists it and grabs it and affects you.
It will. I can't read it when every time I tried to work with my editor and edit it. I spent more time in tears than I spent working on my book. It was brutal and highly effective therapy to actually edit my book with my editor. He deserves way more money than he got paid because he did more for healing than any therapist has ever done. But
Yeah.
but knowing that, I know that I can't read it just because it's, for me, it's reality. It's not. It's on a page. But
I get that.
yeah, but I pushed through. I pushed through working with him. My wife was really supportive because after each session that we edited my book, or after each session of writing my book, my wife and I had a rough couple of days. But I'm hoping that my daughter will read the book at some point when she's a little bit older.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
You're okay.
I hope that she'll read it when she's older and be like, wow, I understand.
That's wonderful. Oh, I'm sorry you're getting a little worked up.
It's okay. It's my story is a hard story to tell. And
Yeah.
the fact that I get to tell it is really powerful. It means maybe I can make a difference, but it also means I have to relive it.
No, I get it. And I'm sorry for making you relive it, but thank you so much for sharing it as well. It's definitely moving. And it's moving up, so that's exciting. Super exciting.
It is. It is. I did a podcast with Bruce Silverman, former ESPN commentator. He spent like 30 years commentating all of the fights and sporting events. And my podcast is called Losing Privilege, which discusses the before, the during, and after, all of the stuff that wouldn't make it into the book, or that wasn't explained in the book because I would have had a 400,000 word story that would look like a dictionary. I cry a lot in the podcast too. But the podcast talks about in great depth, without giving away any spoilers, all of the things that surround the different chapters of the book and the people that I know. And I also changed most of the names of the people in my book to protect their privacy.
That makes sense. You'll definitely have to send me the link to your podcast to check it out for sure.
Absolutely.
What would you say the hardest part of writing this was, besides the emotional factor and reliving the events?
That I have to answer that two ways, because I wrote my entire book, and then my editor came back, and with almost every one of the most powerful parts of my story. He was like, Josh, you only scratched the surface. Like, let's deep dive. I want you to write 15,000 words about this, the feelings, the emotions, the smells, the personalities. And I thought that I had covered the events in great depth. Forced to go back and look at them very critically and explore all of the things that maybe didn't even register in the moment. That was incredibly hard. And it was incredibly heartwarming a few times too, because some of the people that I write about are some of the brightest lights I've ever met.
Yeah.
Usually those were the people that had the life sentences, that had made peace with their situation. They had been over sentenced. They had made a mistake. Some of them were guilty of what they had done, but they did it when they were 18 back in 1975, and they had been in prison for 50 years. And some they just, it was their home. So that was really heartwarming. It was really difficult. I guess the hardest part though was choosing which stories not to tell, because there were so many more that needed to be told that just couldn't make it in because they didn't fit the coherent story arc. I mean, I crammed 5 years into 75,000 words, 230 pages. That was very hard to do. And over the course of those 5 years, there was just so many powerful and defining things that were connected to the parts that made it into the story. And I felt like cutting them out cut away the explanations and the understanding. So that was the hardest part. Like, how do I choose whether to write about A or B? A happened on a Tuesday, B happened on a Friday. Both of them are easily 30 pages. One of them didn't do anything to support the overall message of the story, but was a powerful story in and of itself. So I actually have a whole second book I'm almost finished with, where I was able to take some of those, put them together. But most of my second book is the 5 years that followed. Because
that's awesome.
Yeah, my story ended 3 weeks after I came home, and the second story starts at that same moment. Same scene.
That's awesome.
Yep.
It sounds wonderful, and I'm so happy for you. It's definitely a book I'm going to have to check out for sure.
Fair warning. Every single person who has read my book has gotten in trouble at work because they haven't gone into work for 2 or 3 days.
Well, it's a good thing that I work from home.
Yeah, so they haven't gone into work for 2 or 3 days when they read my book. In fact, one of my beta readers, I sent her my rough manuscripts when we had mostly finished editing it, and when she read it, she almost lost her job because she skipped work 3 days straight. She couldn't put my book down. One of my other readers, they went on a road trip, and she read my entire book out loud with her 2 teenage sons and her husband in the car. And every time she stopped reading because she was getting car sick or motion sick, one of her sons was like, "Give me the book. I want to keep reading." And and they wouldn't let her put it down. My book is not really child friendly, but if the kids are in their teens, they're probably mature enough to hear it. Parents, definitely use your discretion before you let somebody under the age of 14 read my book, because it is really raw. It's not sexually graphic, but it is really, really raw. And it's fine.
But it might be something that they need to read. Just to...
Yes. So when the people who have read my book, I've gotten a lot of feedback. I haven't gotten as many reviews posted officially as I have had feedback. Whether people are too busy to do it or they don't think of it, I don't know, but I've gotten a lot of feedback, and the general consensus on all of the feedback is the book makes me want to do something, to take action. I don't know where to start, but I have to do something. After reading this book, I can't go through my life knowing that right under my nose, this is happening to people that live in my community. The person, because you don't. So I live in Florida, and in Florida, 69% of Florida residents have been convicted of a felony at some point in time or another in their life. Um, that is a huge percentage of the population. 69% of the people who live in Florida, just in Florida, have been convicted of at least one felony at some point. The average person in America commits 13 felonies every day without even knowing it, because our country has so many laws on the books, both at federal, state, and local levels. So every single person, you could be a school teacher, teaching in an elementary school, and you think that you are a perfect, good, upstanding citizen. And the only difference between me and that school teacher is that the school teacher hasn't gotten caught. They might not even know they're doing something wrong, but they are.
Yeah.
They just haven't gotten caught. And that's really the big difference. And when the people who read my book and they realize that, oh my God, this could have been me just as easily as that fender bender I drove by on my way to work this morning could have been me. It's not like I'm some person that nobody can relate to halfway around the country. I am a well-spoken college graduate. I've grown up in middle and middle upper class communities. I can code switch. I can talk to you if you come from the poorest community. I can connect and relate to you. I could be the person that your kids played with growing up. I could be the person that comes and does your plumbing in your home. I could be the person that you work for, your immediate supervisor.
Yeah.
So like I could be somebody that you know, but I also could be you. And that is what really shocked everybody is, oh my God, this sounds like something that happened in a third world country 100 years ago, but not anything that people who read the first page of my book before I had released my book were like, oh my God, was this in a gulag? Were you a prisoner of war for of Hamas or Al Qaeda? We know you're a veteran. This must have been you as a prisoner of war. There's no way your story could have been anything that happened here in America, but it is, and it happens under our nose. We have the highest percentage of our population incarcerated versus any country in the world, and we have the longest sentences for incarceration of any country in the world. And that says a lot, because also I have to say this. Clearly, I am not the typical demographic of what people are stereotypically expecting to see as somebody that spent 5 years in prison, right? But that's because the media doesn't show that. When I was in prison, it was not actually predominantly black. It was a fairly even split, black, white, and Hispanic. I'll say that there was a slightly larger population of people of color to Hispanics and whites, but you are only aware of that because the way that you go through the system, the way that the media puts your information out there is totally different when you come from a white or a Hispanic background. It is definitely much more in your face. They want the world to know that the poor communities are full of all of these criminals, but they're not. There's just as many people who are locked up that came from the trailer park or that came from the suburban communities as there are from the poor communities. You just don't hear about it. So that's what touches people about my book. That's the feedback that I've gotten the most is I didn't realize that this was so close right here in my backyard. This could have been me.
Yeah. I want to wrap up with this. We are kind of over the time, but I think that that's a really good ending spot. and it definitely makes everyone think, you could be, somebody we played with, or somebody, the next door neighbor, or somebody we worked for, and very relatable.
I'm the person when you go out to eat with your family or your significant other, and there's a local musician sitting there in the restaurant playing music for you while you dine. That's me. I am the songwriter and bass player for a band called Shiv, SHIV as in Victor. And we've been playing local venues all over South Florida. People see me every day when they're just out to eat on a date night or with their families. And nobody even thinks that there's that the people you interact with could have something like this that they carry. So I guess if we're gonna wrap this up, my message to everybody is read my book, because if nothing else, it will open your eyes and your heart to the humanity of the people around you, and pull you out of your comfort zone of where you only worry about you and your immediate family. My book is, from start to finish, my book is just calling people to be kinder to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Look around the world. We just need more love.
I agree. 100%. We need more acceptance, more love, more positivity, and that's something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what you look like, who you love, who you don't love, what you're interested in, what you believe. At the end of the day, all living creatures, humans, animals, everybody wants the same thing. They want to be loved. They want to be free from fear and free from pain. And that unites all of us. Nothing else matters.
I agree 100%. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your amazing story and your everything that's going on with you, and letting us get to know you a little bit more. If you stay on the call, I want to talk to you for a minute afterwards, but
Sure.
Everyone, don't forget to check out Joshua's book and be waiting for the movie and be waiting for the second book, because I know I am. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. And thank you all so much for watching.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And that's a wrap on another episode of Magnificent Authors Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to share another inspiring conversation with a talented author. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Magnificent Authors Podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming conversations with amazing writers. And be sure to check out Magnificent Mamas on our website, which is www.magnificentmamas.us, or on our Facebook page for more inspiring content from incredible authors. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. What resonated with you the most? Head over to Facebook or leave a comment on our website and let me know. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep those imaginations soaring.